She ordered the old man to move. But 9 minutes later, the pilot did the unthinkable. It was supposed to be just another flight, ordinary, uneventful, until a well-dressed woman in business class demanded that an old man, frail, quiet, carrying nothing but a worn coat, be moved away from her seat. What she didn't know was who he really was, what he'd done, and who was watching. Why did the pilot stop the entire flight mid-taxi and personally walk down the aisle? Why did the crew go silent? And why did the passengers start rising one by one, without a single word spoken? Who was this old man who never raised his voice, yet changed the entire tone of the plane? This is a story about dignity, about how we look at others, and how wrong we can be, about a quiet strength that doesn't need to shout to be heard, and one act of unexpected honor that turned a moment of cruelty into something unforgettable. If you're moved by stories that reveal the truth of human nature, both painful and powerful, hit like, share, and subscribe now, because what happens next will stay with you long after the seatbelt sign turns off. Let's begin. Sir, I need you to move to seat 34B. The words dropped like cold water. Ellis Granger looked up from his seat. 14D aisle. Premium economy, the one he had carefully chosen and paid extra for months ago. His left hand rested on the armrest. Fingers curled slightly from habit and injury. His right knee, stiff and swollen beneath gray slacks, stretched cautiously into the open space. The flight attendant, standing before him, wore a polished navy uniform and a practiced smile, but her tone was sharp, clipped. Her name tag read, Mira Colton. "We have a family that needs to sit together," she said. "This row, these 3 seats, are the only ones available for them." Ellis blinked, taking a moment to absorb the request. His hands stayed steady on his thighs. Knuckles weathered. One finger bent at an unnatural angle, a long-heeled break that never quite healed right. The hum of boarding buzzed around them, rolling carry-ons, overhead bins clanking shut, children whining 2 rows ahead. "I'm sorry," Ellis said gently, voice low, "but I booked this seat because of my leg." He didn't elaborate. He didn't mention the VA appointment from last fall, the cortisone shot that barely worked, the way he winced each time stairs betrayed him. Mira's smile didn't falter, but her eyes lost their patience. "I understand, sir," she said, glancing at her tablet. "But if you don't move, we won't be able to close the doors." And that was it. A choice that wasn't really a choice. Ellis glanced toward the front of the cabin. The mother in question stood with a toddler balanced on one hip, 2 more children orbiting her knees. She looked exhausted, frazzled, a woman trying to hold it all together. He didn't blame her. He looked back at Mira. "I'm not trying to cause trouble," he said. "It's just 5 hours in a middle seat will be hard on this leg." Mira tapped her screen again. Tone cool. "We can offer you 34B. It's further back. Center seat. Only one available." She said it like it was a generous compromise. Ellis hesitated. Inside, his thoughts churned. He wasn't a man who made scenes. He didn't like being the center of attention, not in a grocery line, not in church pews, and especially not 30,000 feet above ground. He had lived long enough to understand the social weight of being in the way. But this wasn't a preference. This was pain. This was surviving a war, then spending decades with the quiet, echoing consequences. The boarding process paused. A few passengers turned their heads, and in that moment, Ellis felt something else, not pain, not anger, guilt, as if he were the problem for wanting to sit in the seat he paid for, as if age and injury made him selfish. He breathed in slowly, counted 4 beats, then, quietly, he said, "All right." He unbuckled his belt, the metal clip clicking faintly. Bracing himself against the seat back, he stood slow, deliberate. With a wince he tried to mask. "I'm Ellis Granger," he added under his breath. "Army medic, retired." Mira said nothing, just waved the mother forward. As Ellis limped down the aisle toward the back of the plane, not a single passenger said a word. The mother didn't meet his eyes. The toddler clutched her shoulder and yawned. Seat 34B waited cramped, wedged between 2 strangers, a spot that smelled faintly of antiseptic and old coffee. He didn't complain. He just sat down, folded his hands, and closed his eyes. But somewhere in row 11 someone had been watching, and they had just taken out their phone. Ellis Granger didn't like flying. It wasn't the altitude or the confined space or even the security lines that always seemed longer than necessary. It was the stillness, the forced immobility, the way a flight froze time, left him alone with his thoughts at 30,000 feet. And at 76 there were plenty of thoughts to fill a cabin. Born in a small, timber-backed town called Westford, Oregon, Ellis had grown up beneath the weight of silence. His father didn't talk much, neither did he. The Granger men believed in showing up, fixin' what they could, and endurin' what they couldn't. Words were secondary, pain was private. When Ellis turned 19, he volunteered Vietnam. He didn't enlist because of patriotism, though he cared for his country. He joined because he was good with his hands, quiet hands, steady hands. He became a field medic, trained to run into chaos while others ducked for cover. He saw things he never told a soul, bandaged wounds that bled through anyway, cradled boys younger than he was, whispering to them even after their eyes stopped blinking. The war took his hearing in one ear and the cartilage in his left knee, but it gave him something else, a reverence for life, a quiet urgency, a hunger to help that never faded. After the war, Ellis came home to an America that had already moved on. He never expected parades or banners, but the indifference, that stung. So he kept his head down, married Ruth, the only woman who ever made him laugh out loud, raised 2 kids, both now grown, both living too far away to visit often. Then came Micah, his grandson, bright, bold, thoughtful, always asking questions, always listening closely. Micah wanted to follow in Ellis's footsteps, but cleaner, more modern, he chose the Navy. And when Ellis heard the boy had made it to the U.S. Naval Academy, first in their family to do so, he made a vow he would be there to see Micah graduate. Even if it meant flying across the country with a knee that screamed at every step. He booked the ticket early. He checked the airline's policy. He chose seat 14D, premium economy, aisle so he could stretch out that stubborn leg, take pressure off the joint. It wasn't indulgent, it was survival. He budgeted carefully, canceled cable for 3 months, skipped the new water heater, ate sandwiches most nights. Also, he could afford 1 flight, 1 seat, 1 moment of pride. He never told Micah about the pain, or the limp, or the nightmares. The boy didn't need to carry that. Let him march in white dress uniform with his shoulders high, his shoes shining. Let him believe in honor. As the flight boarded that morning, Ellis had moved slowly but without complaint. He nodded to the gate agent, smiled at the man who scanned his pass. walk the jet bridge at a careful pace, one hand on the rail. He'd reached his seat 14D and sighed. Finally, he lowered himself gently, keeping his knee bent just enough, stowed his small canvas bag beneath the seat. He didn't carry much a book, some dried fruit, and a hand-sewn banner that read, "Congratulations, Micah, love, Grandpa." For a minute, he let his eyes close. That minute didn't last. He heard footsteps, a voice. "Sir, I need you to move. Now, back in 34B. He sat wedged between a teenager in noise-canceling headphones and a man in a wrinkled shirt who kept elbowing the shared armrest. The smell of instant coffee lingered in the air. His knee throbbed, but Ellis said nothing, because silence was something he'd been trained to live inside. What he didn't know, not yet, was that silence had begun to crack. 3 rows up, someone was still watching him. At 5:41 Gate 42A was already humming with the quiet chaos of early departures. Children clutched juice boxes. Businessmen typed with one hand while sipping burnt coffee with the other. A woman argued softly with her partner about car rental details. Over it all, the boarding announcements floated through the terminal like static-filled lullabies. Ellis Granger had been there since just after 4:30. He didn't like cutting it close. Early was his habit. Early meant control. Early meant no one had to make room for him. He sat near the window, a seat slightly apart from the crowd, his small canvas bag beside his feet. He wore a faded brown jacket and dark trousers, the kind of outfit that could fit in anywhere. Nothing flashy. His shoes were practical, broken in years ago and never quite retired. He kept a paperback folded over one leg, not really reading. Mostly, he watched. He noticed the gate agent young, sharp ponytail, working on her third coffee checking ID after ID with mechanical politeness. He watched a man in a suit grumble about his upgrade being denied. And he noticed the family across from him, 3 kids, a stroller, a distracted mother scrolling through a boarding pass on her phone. Ellis didn't judge. He just observed, quietly. He never needed much to feel content: a hot drink, an on-time flight, and a seat that didn't punish his bones. That was all. His name had been called early during boarding group 2, a small luxury for choosing premium economy. When the scanner beeped and the agent handed him back his stub, she said, "Thank you for your service, Mr. Granger." After glancing at the veteran badge attached to his ID, he nodded, smiled faintly. As he walked down the jet bridge, he kept his pace measured. His knee had already begun to ache, not badly, but enough to warn him that today would be a long one. He ignored it. Years of practice. The air inside the plane was colder than expected, that familiar recycled chill. He found 14D, leaned on the seat for balance, and lowered himself slowly. No one offered help. That was fine. He didn't expect them to. His bag slid easily under the seat ahead. He straightened the lapel of his jacket, rested his hand over his knee, and closed his eyes for just a second. He imagined the moment Micah would see him in the crowd, maybe not wave, maybe just smile, but Ellis would be there. That mattered. Until the shuffle began. The soft commotion of someone speaking with a flight attendant not far. Then the unmistakable tap of polished shoes along the aisle, a clipboard, a pause beside him. "Sir, are you in seat 14D? He opened his eyes, looked up, and the world, which had just begun to feel steady, shifted. "Sir, we really need your cooperation." The words were calm on the surface, but Mira Colton's voice had the thin edge of authority sharpened by routine. She stood, tablet in hand, scanning him the way you might scan a barcode, precise, detached. Ellis Granger sat still in 14D, his hands folded loosely on his lap. "I understand," he said again, quietly, "but this is my seat. I booked it early because of a service-related knee injury. I can't sit in the back for 5 hours. My leg won't make it." Mira's practiced smile didn't fade, but something in her jaw shifted, tightened. "There's a family, 3 children who were separated during check-in. This is the only block of 3 open seats we have left. If we don't resolve this now, the flight will be delayed." She looked at him directly now. Not unkind, but not understanding either. Just procedural. Ellis felt the knot twist deeper in his stomach. "Where would I go?" he asked. Mira tapped on her screen. "We have 1 open seat left, 34B, center seat, toward the rear. It's not ideal. I realize that, but it's the only available option. Of course it was the middle. It always was." He said nothing at first. Just let the information settle in the space between them. His eyes flicked toward the front. He saw the mother now, the same woman from the gate, bouncing her toddler and shifting her weight from foot to foot. One child clung to her arm. Another leaned against the seat divider, watching something on a phone. Ellis took a breath. He could feel the stare of other passengers now. No one said anything. No gasps, no murmurs, but the energy had shifted. He could feel judgment starting to curdle in the air. An old man, refusing to help a mother, selfish, stubborn, in the way. His jaw tightened. He was not trying to be difficult. He had paid for this seat not for comfort, but for survival. For a chance to sit through 5 hours without his knee locking up so badly that he'd need 2 people to help him out of the seat. And he had done everything right. Booked early, checked the policy, paid the fee. Still, here he was. Mira stepped back slightly, her tone cooling further. "Sir, I need a decision now. We cannot close the cabin doors until this is resolved." Ellis looked at her for a long moment. His chest rose with a slow, deliberate breath. His thoughts churned. He didn't want to be the problem. He didn't want to be the headline. He didn't want to see himself whispered about by people with earbuds and coffee cups and nowhere else to be. And worst of all, he didn't want to disappoint his grandson. What would Micah think if he caused a scene, if he made a fuss? Was this the moment he'd be remembered for? He reached down and unbuckled his belt, the click louder than it should have been. Then, using the seat in front for leverage, he pulled himself up slow, deliberate. A wince crossed his face, sharp and unhidden this time. No one looked. "I'm Ellis Granger," he said, voice steady, former Army medic, Vietnam, 1969. "I'd like it noted that I gave up my medically necessary seat under pressure." Mira said nothing, just nodded curtly and stepped aside to wave the mother forward. Ellis turned, gripping his bag, and began the long walk to the back of the plane. He passed rows of heads turned discreetly away as if eye contact might make them complicit. A few passengers adjusted their seat belts. One man coughed. That was all. The mother never said thank you. The toddler watched him with wide eyes as he passed, and Ellis, tired, aching, not quite angry, just gave the boy a nod. No drama, no protest, just resignation. He reached 34B. It was exactly what he expected. Tight, trapped, lit by a flickering overhead bulb. The aisle smelled faintly of chemical cleaner and instant coffee. He lowered himself into the seat like a man folding into memory. And as he exhaled, slow and shallow, he told himself, 5 hours. I've been through worse. But in the seat ahead, 3 rows forward, on the other side of the aisle, someone watched the entire thing without looking away once. And she had just pulled out her phone. Seat 34B had no mercy in it. The cushion sagged inward. The legroom was an afterthought, and the curve of the overhead bin gave the illusion of space but offered none. Ellis Granger sat hunched, one shoulder slightly raised to avoid brushing the teenager on his right, who wore noise-canceling headphones and hadn't acknowledged his presence even once. To his left, a man in a wrinkled button-down shirt typed on a laptop with frantic keystrokes, elbow parked squarely in their shared space as if staking a claim. Ellis didn't complain. He shifted his left leg gently, slowly trying to find some angle of relief, but 34B offered no such kindness. The tight bend of his knee sparked pain that flared up the side of his thigh. He exhaled through his nose and rested his hands atop his lap. Folding one over the other, his fingers were thick, knuckles swollen. Years of calluses and strain made them look like they belonged to a blacksmith, not a medic. His left pinky bent at a strange angle, the legacy of a battlefield fracture that never healed right. The cabin around him buzzed with a rise in energy, people settling, flight attendants clicking seatbelts into place, the thud of closing bins. The plane hadn't even left the gate, but Ellis already felt smaller, pressed in on all sides by apathy, and worst of all, no one had looked him in the eye. Not Mira, not the family, not the strangers watching it unfold, and not the people now beside him. He didn't want thanks. He didn't expect fanfare, but the silence, the kind that tiptoes around decency, hurt more than he'd admit. Across the aisle and up 3 rows, Jordan Ellis had seen everything. She didn't mean to. She'd boarded late, laptop in hand, blazer folded across her arm, a woman in her 40s, professional, polished, tired. She'd barely made it through TSA after a client meeting had run long. Her seat 11C gave her just the right angle to catch the exchange at 14D, then the long, slow walk to the back of the plane. She hadn't meant to watch, but something about the way Ellis stood, the slowness in his movements, the tension in his jaw had anchored her attention, and when he passed her row, she'd seen the flicker of pain behind his eyes, the kind that wasn't just physical. She remembered thinking, that man deserves better than a middle seat. Now, as the cabin moved on around him, safety checks, luggage adjustments, pre-flight chatter, she still hadn't opened her laptop. Instead, she quietly unlocked her phone and began typing a message. Not for Twitter, not for outrage. Just a quiet note to someone she knew, a cousin who worked in customer relations at Clearwind Airlines. The carrier operating Flight 1846, passenger Ellis Granger, seat 14D, forced to move due to crew decision, confirmed medical need, now in 34B, observed from row 11. Cabin crew unempathetic. Please escalate. She hit send. She wasn't sure if anything would come of it, but some moments you don't let pass. Some moments you act even if no one sees it. Back in 34B. Ellis adjusted himself again, wincing as his knee throbbed under pressure. He tried not to draw attention, tried not to shift too often. The kid beside him didn't notice. The man on the laptop sighed and kept typing, still invading the armrest like he owned it. Ellis's thoughts wandered. Micah. What would he say if he saw this? Would he be ashamed of his grandfather for not speaking up, or proud that he didn't cause a scene? Was this what dignity looked like now? Just enduring. He turned toward the window. though he had no view, just a plastic panel and the reflection of his own face older than he felt, aligned with a life no one asked him about. The overhead lights dimmed slightly, the doors hissed as they shut, and the engines began to hum, low and rising. Jordan, 3 rows ahead, stared at her phone and wondered if anyone would actually read her message. Then, to her surprise, it buzzed back, received. Escalate into flight ops. If unresolved, crew will be notified before takeoff. Her heart ticked faster. Maybe, just maybe, someone was listening. The cabin buzzed with the quiet choreography of pre-flight. Seatbelts snapped, headphones went in. Overhead, bins thudded closed one by one. The intercom chirped with safety instructions delivered in that strangely cheerful monotone. No one listened. Everyone waited. But row 11 was holding its breath. Jordan Ellis sat still in 11C, phone in hand, eyes flicking toward the back of the plane. She couldn't see Ellis Granger anymore. Not directly, but she didn't need to. She could picture him perfectly hunched between 2 indifferent strangers. Leg locked in a position it had no business being in. Pain hidden behind polite silence. Her phone buzzed again. She glanced down, escalated, flagged to in-flight ops, waiting on response from flight crew liaison. Jordan exhaled slowly, pressing the phone to her thigh as if to anchor herself. She didn't know why this hit so hard. Maybe because she'd seen her own father treated like an inconvenience one too many times. Or maybe because she'd spent her entire career learning to listen between the lines, and what she'd seen in Ellis wasn't defiance. It was dignity under pressure. Across the cockpit door, Captain Rowan Hale sat in his chair, reviewing final flight specs. At 51 with over 14,000 hours of flight time, Hale was a man known for precision not just in navigation, but in life. He didn't rattle easily, he didn't rush, he didn't tolerate nonsense. A former Air Force pilot turned commercial captain, Hale carried his old unit's motto on a patch inside his flight bag: integrity in silence, courage in stillness. His co-pilot, Evan Lake, a bright-eyed younger man still green by military standards, ran through the final checklist aloud: fuel confirmed, weather clear, takeoff runway approved, flight 1846 ready for taxi. But then a red notification ping on Hale's console. Not from ground control, not mechanical, passenger escalation routed through corporate. Hale narrowed his eyes and tapped the screen. Passenger Ellis Granger. Seat reassignment from 14D to 34B due to crew-initiated family consolidation. Passenger is a veteran with a confirmed medical need. Witnessed by Diamond-level client Jordan Ellis, row 11C, recommended escalation, awaiting pilot discretion. He blinked. Once, twice. The name Ellis Granger didn't mean much at first, but something in it stuck. He pulled up the internal manifest. Veteran status confirmed. Army, field medic, Vietnam. He looked up out the cockpit door as if he could see all the way to the back of the aircraft through steel and seats and silence. Then, with no words to his co-pilot, Hale unbuckled his harness. "Hold the taxi," he said calmly. Evan turned his head, confused. Captain Rowan Hale was already halfway out of his seat. "Hold position. I'll be back in 3 minutes." He stepped into the narrow hallway behind the cockpit, where lead flight attendant Mira Colton was busy confirming baggage latches. She turned, surprised to see him. Captain Hale. "Everything okay?" He kept his voice neutral, eyes steady. There was a reassignment. Seat 14D to 34B, passenger named Ellis Granger. She paused, nodded. Yes, sir. That was me. We had a family with kids needing to sit together. Was that man informed of his options clearly? Her face stiffened. We offered what we had. Only one seat left. He agreed to move. He agreed. Hale repeated, voice lower now, under pressure. Mira said nothing. Captain Hale adjusted the cuffs of his sleeves, ran a hand briefly down the edge of his uniform, and turned toward the cabin aisle. From seat 11C, Jordan watched him emerge. The cockpit door had opened, and with it the entire energy of the cabin began to change. The hush came first. It wasn't loud or sudden. No dramatic music, no drop trays, just a slow ripple of quiet, like a tide pulling back from shore. Passengers instinctively turned toward the front as Captain Rowan Hale stepped fully into the cabin aisle, his posture tall, steps deliberate. His uniform was pressed to precision, 4 gold stripes on his shoulders, wings shining just beneath the cockpit light. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. Row by row, conversations faded, screens paused, coffee cups were lowered. The mere presence of a captain out of the cockpit, especially before takeoff, carried weight. Something was wrong, or about to be made right. Jordan Ellis in 11C stiffened slightly. Her pulse quickened. Her hands dropped from her phone to her lap. Captain Hale's eyes scanned the rows as he walked, not in search of trouble, but of clarity. He passed 14D, now occupied by a squirming toddler and her mother, who shrank slightly as he passed. He offered them no glare, no judgment. He simply kept moving, one step at a time, until he reached the back third of the plane, row 34, seat B. There sat Ellis Granger, head leaned back, eyes half shut, hands folded atop his lap. He looked older under the cabin lighting, smaller, the kind of small that came not from size, but from being made to feel invisible. Captain Hale stopped before him. Mr. Granger Ellis opened his eyes slowly, startled by the voice. He blinked up at the uniform. It took him a second. Yes, my name is Captain Rowan Hale, he said, voice steady and calm. I've just received word about your reassignment. I want to say, first, this never should have happened. Ellis glanced sideways at the passengers near him. The teenager with headphones finally pulled one off. The laptop man froze mid-keystroke. I didn't want to hold up the flight, Ellis murmured. I didn't want to cause trouble. Captain Hale's expression didn't change, but his voice grew firmer. Sir, you didn't cause trouble. The system failed you, and on behalf of Clearwind Airlines, and as a former service member myself, I sincerely apologize. There was a beat, a shift in breath across the cabin, the kind of moment when everything tilts just slightly and people know they'll remember it. Then Captain Hale did something no one expected. He raised his right hand, and with crisp, military precision he saluted. Ellis blinked again. The silence around them deepened. People turned in their seats. A child stopped mid-whine. The weight of the gesture hung in the air like something sacred. Ellis hesitated, then slowly lifted a hand to return the salute, smaller, softer, but steady. Captain Hale nodded, then turned toward the nearest flight attendant. Is seat 1A available? He asked. The crew member stammered. I believe it's currently occupied, sir. Then you'll ask for a volunteer. If no one offers, let them know the captain of this aircraft is requesting that seat for a veteran who should never have been moved. From behind him, Mira Colton approached slowly, clutching her tablet like a clipboard shielding her from fire. Captain, If 1A is unavailable," he continued, calmly, "Mr. Granger will take my jump seat, and I'll fly standing if I have to." Gasps rippled. Someone near the front whispered, "Is this real?" Ellis Granger stared up at the man, speechless, not out of shock, but something deeper disbelief giving way to something he hadn't felt in years. Respect. The kind that didn't need applause or medals, just recognition. Captain Hale turned back to him. "Sir, would you allow us to correct this mistake?" Ellis swallowed. His throat was dry. His voice cracked when he said, "I'd be grateful." Then, gently, the captain offered him an arm, and together they began the slow, quiet walk to the front of the plane. As Captain Rowan Hale led Ellis Granger down the aisle, the cabin held its breath. They moved slowly, not because of age or stiffness, though Ellis's knee was indeed aching, but because silence had a gravity of its own. Every step seemed to draw the air tighter around them, as if the entire flight were leaning in, listening without sound. At first, no one moved. Then, row by row, passengers began to rise, not all at once, not with fanfare, just quiet, instinctual reverence. A woman in 21D, she wore a navy pantsuit and had barely looked up from her Kindle earlier, stood and stepped back, allowing them to pass. A young man in 18C followed, pulling his cap to his chest. Soon, others joined. Without being asked, like dominoes tipping softly in sequence, the passengers parted, forming a narrow, respectful aisle down the aircraft's center. Ellis looked bewildered. He hadn't expected this, not at all. His fingers trembled slightly as he rested them on the back of each seat for balance. Eyes flicked up to meet his. Nods offered without words. Even the toddler from earlier, now cradled in her mother's lap in row 14, looked up, sensing something different. Jordan Ellis, seated in 11C, stood too. She didn't clap, she didn't cry, but her gaze followed every step, and in her eyes was something more powerful than pride recognition. Captain Hale paused near 7B, turned briefly, and checked on Ellis's pace. "You all right, sir?" he asked softly. Ellis gave a modest nod, then whispered, "Haven't had this kind of welcome in 50 years. They moved on. The silence in the cabin deepened not out of awkwardness, but out of awe. The only sound was the soft shuffle of shoes and the occasional thump of someone standing a little too quickly. Even the crying infant in 9A went quiet, as if lulled into stillness by the shift in energy. At the front, the first-class curtain was pulled aside. A young attendant with flushed cheeks stood there, holding it open, eyes wide as she realized who was coming. She stepped back instantly, lowering her head. "Right this way, sir," she whispered. "Seat 1A, normally reserved for elite passengers, CEOs, entertainers, or the ultra-wealthy, sat empty." A fresh bottle of water had been placed on the tray, a warm blanket folded neatly in the corner. Ellis paused before it, unsure. Captain Hale gently guided him forward. "You'll be more comfortable here," he said. Ellis turned to face him, eyes glassy, but not yet crying. "I didn't ask for this," he said. "I know," the captain replied, "but you earned it." The two men shook hands, brief, firm, silent. Then Captain Hale turned, looked down the aisle still lined with standing passengers, and said clearly, not loudly, but with absolute calm, "Thank you all for your respect." A few nodded. Then, just before the curtain drew closed again, a single clap broke the silence. It came from mid-cabin. No one saw who started it. Then another, and another. No thunderous applause, no wild cheering, just a slow, solemn, growing wave of appreciation, echoing softly through the narrow walls of the aircraft. Captain Hale stood still a moment. Let it rise. Let it breathe. Then he turned and stepped back into the cockpit. The curtain closed softly behind Ellis Granger, sealing off first class. But what remained behind it was not silence anymore. Row by row, passengers returned to their seats, but the energy had shifted. The hum of the engines was the same. The plane's lighting hadn't changed. Yet something in the air had thickened, not unpleasant, just heavier with meaning. People glanced at each other more openly now. Screens were dimmed, conversations resumed, but in lower tones, more aware. The flight hadn't even taken off, yet everyone on board sensed it already. They were part of a story no one would forget. In row 11C, Jordan Ellis sat motionless, staring at her hands in her lap. Her lips were pressed tight. She had been so certain, so righteous in her way. It wasn't just about being disturbed. It wasn't about the noise or the shuffle when Ellis Granger tried to settle into the seat next to her. It was about how invisible she'd felt lately. She thought pushing back would make her seen, that standing her ground would assert something. But now she felt hollow. She glanced up and saw Mira Colton, the flight attendant, pacing just ahead. Mira was biting her thumbnail, eyes unfocused, her shoulders tense. She was walking toward the galley and muttering under her breath, too soft to hear clearly. But her face told the story. Not guilt exactly, but something more jagged doubt. She stopped mid-step when she noticed Jordan looking. Their eyes met. Neither looked away. It wasn't confrontation. Not now. More like a mirror. Two women on opposite ends of a decision, both seeing a bit of themselves in the other's cracks. Jordan raised her hand slightly, just enough to call her over. Mira hesitated, then stepped closer. "I didn't know," Jordan whispered. "I should have asked more questions." Mira replied. Both statements hung there. Incomplete, imperfect, honest. Jordan leaned forward, voice even softer. Who was he?" Mira shook her head. "I don't know everything, but I heard the captain say he was once a lieutenant colonel. Saw combat, lost a brother, served for 35 years. Jordan exhaled sharply, and we treated him like baggage. Mira didn't respond. She couldn't. Not yet. She looked down the aisle toward the cockpit, where Captain Hale had disappeared again. The cabin door now sealed. The man had made a stand, one that might cost him with the airline, with protocol, with someone higher up. But as Mira stood there, she realized something that chilled her spine. He hadn't hesitated. Not once. Jordan's voice cut through again. "Does your report already show?" I complained. Mira nodded, almost imperceptibly. Jordan closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them. Firmer. "Can I retract it?" The question surprised Mira. She paused. "I'll make a note," she said. "But I think what matters more is what you do after we land." Jordan gave a faint nod, then added, almost reluctantly, "Thank you." Mira moved on, but her steps were slower now. In row 34, the seat Ellis Granger had been forced into now sat empty. A few passengers nearby quietly spoke of what had just happened. One pulled out their phone to search Ellis Granger and veteran pilot salute. No results yet, but they knew it wouldn't be long before someone told the story online and far up in first class. Ellis sat back, sipping water, staring out the small window, but not watching the clouds. His mind drifted back to a name on a stone, a folded flag, a brother who never came home. The seat beside him felt both full and empty, and in that moment, the quiet inside him was not pain, but peace. Behind the locked cockpit door, Captain Rowan Hale sat in silence. The co-pilot, Avery Mills, didn't speak. He glanced once, then twice at Rowan, but chose not to press. There was something in the way the captain's fingers rested on the yoke. Not rigid, not relaxed either, a kind of tension held beneath practiced calm. The flight hadn't yet left the ground. It could have, 15 minutes ago. But Rowan wasn't ready, not because of the passengers, not because of procedure, because of memory. He reached into the small leather pouch beside his seat and pulled out a fraying photograph. Folded once down the center, creased along the edges. He didn't need to look at it to know what it showed: two boys in uniform. One taller, grinning with uneven teeth, the other squinting into the sun, stubborn as hell. Ellis Granger and James Hale, his father. Rowan had grown up hearing the name Granger like a hymn whispered at night. If not for Granger, I wouldn't have come home. If not for Granger, you wouldn't be here. Granger stood when others ran. It became legend in their house, but Rowan never met him. After the war, Ellis disappeared into quiet until today, when he boarded Flight 908 under a basic fare, barely noticed by anyone, just another old man with a boarding pass. Rowan had watched from the cockpit window as Ellis struggled with his bag, then with his seat assignment, until Mira called. And when he stepped into the aisle and saw that face, aged but unmistakable, Rowan's breath had hitched. It wasn't just recognition. It was debt. His father had passed 3 years ago. Never got to shake Granger's hand. Never said thank you properly. The military funeral was crisp, precise, honors done right, but something had felt unfinished. And now, the man who once pulled James Hale from a firestorm outside Kandahar had been ordered to move like luggage. Rowan hadn't hesitated. He'd left the cockpit without a word, not to make a show, not to make a scene, but because something inside him had snapped loose. In all his years flying, Rowan had never broken protocol, never delayed a flight unless it was mechanical or medical, but today, reverence was reason enough. Avery finally spoke. "We good to taxi?" Sir Rowan took a breath. "Just give it another minute," he said. "Understood." Rowan looked again at the photograph. He remembered his father, bruised and trembling in a VA hospital room, saying softly, "One day, son, you'll be in a position to honor those who came before. Don't miss your moment." Rowan hadn't missed it. Not this time. He folded the photo again and tucked it away. Then he clicked the intercom. "This is your captain speaking," he began, voice measured, firm. "We'll be taxiing in just a moment. I thank you for your patience. And I thank you, all of you, for something more important than timeliness today: human decency." He paused. Let the words land. In a world that rushes past veterans, elders, and strangers in need, today, you chose differently. And I promise you this, that choice will echo beyond this flight. He clicked off. In the quiet that followed, Avery gave a low whistle. That was something. "Sir." Captain Hale smiled faintly. It had to be. Then, at last, he gave the nod. "Let's bring her up." And with that, Flight 908 began to move. But, on board, the real journey had already begun at 36,000 feet. Flight 908 finally began its gentle descent toward Denver. Outside, the clouds parted like a curtain, revealing the rugged tapestry of the Rockies below Inside, a quieter transformation had been taken place not in altitude, but in attitude. Passengers who were strangers when they boarded now shared glances of acknowledgement. The man in 22B who'd filmed the confrontation with trembling hands, he had quietly deleted the footage. Something about it now felt like theft, like capturing a sacred moment with greedy fingers. Instead, he sat watching the elderly woman beside him sketch the mountains through her window, her pencil strokes a slow, meditative rhythm. In row 11, Jordan Ellis still hadn't moved. Not to eat, not to speak. Her hands rested on the safety card in the seat pocket in front of her. But her mind was miles from safety. She had never imagined that one interaction, one decision made in haste could feel this loud inside her chest. She looked down at the coat in her lap, Ellis Granger's coat, still folded neatly. He'd left it with her after the switch, pressing it gently into her arms with a quiet, "You'll get cold." It was a kindness undeserved. She blinked away the sting in her eyes. Behind her, Mira Colton was doing a quiet head count, checking belts and trays, but her attention lingered on the man in 1A, Ellis Granger. He sat still, upright but relaxed, as though he had floated through turbulence far worse than this. Mira had walked these aisles for 15 years. She'd seen delays, fights, tears, even births mid-air, but never had a flight made her feel more like a witness than a server. Something about the old man's calm, the captain's words, the silent shifting of passengers' postures, it made her believe they were part of something bigger than just travel. As she passed Jordan's row again, Jordan reached out. Her fingers grazed Mira's wrist. "I think I need to speak to him." Mira paused. "May I?" Jordan asked, her voice barely audible above the white noise of descent. Mira nodded. Jordan stood, carrying the coat, her steps tentative. The walk to first class felt longer than ever. Every footstep sounded like it echoed across the years she'd ignored her instincts, the better part of her that used to speak up before ego swallowed it. When she reached 1A, Ellis looked up. His expression didn't harden. He simply waited. Jordan held out the coat with both hands. "I believe this belongs to you," she said softly. Ellis studied her, then took it, folding it across his lap, not saying yes or no, just accepting. Jordan hesitated, then sat beside him in the empty seat across the aisle. "I didn't know who you were," she began. "You didn't need to." Ellis replied, "Respect shouldn't come from a title." She winced. "But I was rude, wrong." He didn't respond at first, just looked ahead. "When I was younger," he said at last, "I thought I had to earn kindness, that I had to be somebody, wear the uniform, earn the medals. But it turns out, most people don't see the man behind the service. They see wrinkles, they see weakness." Jordan looked down, ashamed. "But today," Ellis added, turning toward her, "someone saw enough to stand still and speak, and sometimes that's all it takes." She blinked. "You mean the Captain?" Ellis smiled faintly. "No, I mean you, just now." The plane dipped slightly, a subtle signal they were nearing the runway. Jordan sat back, tears silently slipping down her cheek, feeling for the first time in years that she was becoming the person she used to admire. The wheels of Flight 908 touched down with a gentle shudder, a soft thump that barely stirred the silence within the cabin. There was no applause, no collective cheer like so many landings before. This descent had been different. Every soul on that flight had descended inward. Jordan Ellis sat upright in her seat now, her spine straighter, her eyes steadier. She wasn't proud of who she'd been at the start of the flight, but she had faced it. And, sometimes, facing it was the bravest thing one could do. Next to her, Ellis Granger folded his coat neatly over one arm. He hadn't said much after their conversation. He hadn't needed to. His silence held more peace than most words could muster. Up in the cockpit, Captain Rowan Hale placed the intercom down after delivering standard landing instructions. Then he paused, stood, and took a long look out over the tarmac before opening the cockpit door and stepping into the cabin. Passengers were beginning to stand, collect bags, check phones. But as Rowan stepped into the aisle, the atmosphere shifted once more. He walked to the front. His eyes searched until they met Granger's, and then, without ceremony or signal, Rowan stood at attention and saluted. The cabin froze. Gasps broke softly, muffled by hands over mouths. Several passengers, including Mira, instinctively placed a hand over their heart. Granger blinked, surprised. "You know my father," Rowan said, voice low but carrying. Granger tilted his head. James Rowan nodded. "He wouldn't be alive. I wouldn't be alive without you." Granger looked down, emotion flickering in the furrows of his weathered face. "I served with many," he said. "Didn't know who I'd leave behind when I came back. Never expected it would lead to this." Rowan extended his hand. "Thank you. For your service, for your sacrifice, for still standing." Granger stood slowly, took the hand, and returned the shake with a firmness unexpected for a man of his age. For a moment, that handshake, that silent bridge across time and generation, held the entire plane. And then, as if on cue, the passengers stood, one by one, no announcement, no request. They stood in quiet honor as Granger exited first, led down the aisle with dignity. Several nodded to him. Some offered whispered thank yous. Others simply met his eyes and held them something rare in today's rushed world. Jordan followed a few paces behind, head bowed, but this time in humility, not shame. Outside, the gate had a small cluster of personnel waiting. Word had spread someone had seen the delay, heard rumors through airline channels, texts exchanged between crews. A young employee at the gate was filming discreetly, but not for virality. She would later caption it, "We forgot what honor looked like until today." As Ellis Granger stepped onto solid ground, the sun caught the side of his face. He paused, took a deep breath. A smile tugged at the corner of his lips. He had boarded a plane expecting nothing but silence, and, walked off, remembered. We live in a world where we scroll past others in silence, where appearances are judged before words are spoken. But sometimes, just sometimes, life gives us a second chance to truly see someone. Ellis Granger never asked to be honored. He didn't wear his medals. He didn't raise his voice. But, in the quiet strength of his presence, in the grace he offered to those who wronged him, he reminded us what true dignity looks like. This wasn't just a flight. It was a mirror. And maybe, just maybe, it showed us how far we still have to go. To Jordan Ellis, it was a lesson. To the captain, it was a homecoming. To the passengers, it was a moment they'll never forget. And to us, it should be a reminder that behind every face is a story. Behind every wrinkle, a war fought. And behind every seat number, a human soul. If this story touched you, if it stirred something inside, we invite you to like, share, and subscribe to our channel, because we believe stories like this can change hearts. And in the next video, Another truth will take flight. We'll see you there.